John, let's talk big deals. NBA future, Al Michaels done at NBC, and the NFL.
And Andrew, we came up with the real media angle to Shohei Ohtani's $700 million deal, though while more factual, it may not be as entertaining as this.
This is a joke. Baseball is going to allow this? They're going to allow the Dodgers to bring on Ohtani and allow them to defer all the money so they don't sit there and they get murdered with the luxury tax to give them a chance to sign all these players? Why don't we just give the Dodgers every player? Give them Blake Snell, give them the Yamamoto, give them Ohtani, give them everybody so they can win some championships. I haven't won in 100 years. Why don't we give them everybody? Is this what baseball wants?
And we're back. The Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. John, a lot to talk about. NBA, NFL, Al Michaels, John Morosi, and the Ohtani deal, and also the media implications of it. And we also have Karp's Corner. Karp's Corner a little bit later. But let's start up with who's up and who's down.
Who's up? Who's down?
John, why don't you lead us off?
Andrew, who was that? Making a big return to the podcast.
Big return.
All right, I'm going to go who's up. My who's up is Adam Silver. And that's because the in-season tournament, it's a thing. I'm not even going to talk about its role in the next NBA media negotiations or viewership. We're going to have Karp's Corner on later on to talk about that. I know what it's not. It's not a championship. It's not even a conference finals. It has plenty of detractors. I was on a text exchange on Sunday morning with friends who hated it. I was the only supporter of it. Shout out to Timmy and Ricky on that. But look, it's undeniable that after just 1 year, it's already a tentpole event for the league, much like the All-Star game. I never paid attention to November and December games in the NBA before. I did this year. Silver's biggest accomplishment is that he got the players to buy into the tournament. So it felt like playoff basketball, but we're only in December. Adam Silver's been upfront. Like there are going to be tweaks to it. The point differential has to go. Did you see that Celtics Bulls game? Celtics were up by like 25 and with 2 minutes left, and they're intentionally fouling Andre Drummond late in the fourth quarter in order to get the point differential to go. So he's acknowledged the need to make tweaks. But by all reports, he's thrilled about it, and we're definitely going to be seeing it again next year, and almost certainly the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that.
John, my who's up is NBC's Noah Eagle. Al Michaels will not be doing a playoff game this year for NBC. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's Eagle at 27 years old, going to get a playoff game. He and Todd Blackledge, and then on the sideline, Catherine Tappan, their Big Ten crew, will be doing a regular season game on NBC, Steelers and Bengals. And then Eagle gets a playoff game that was Al Michaels last year. So at 27 years old, he's going to do a playoff game. And then the Super Bowl, he'll be on the call for the Nickelodeon game with Nate Burleson, which he's done a couple of years in a row and has done real well. So Noah Eagle gets my who's up.
All right, Andrew, my who's down, Roger Goodell. We all know that the NFL is king. It's been king for as long as I've been covering the media business. The NFL executives, they truly believe that the league's popularity is primarily responsible for the success of ESPN, Fox, DirecTV, you name it. Back in the late 1990s, CBS went without the NFL, and its executives were so scarred that they did whatever they could to make sure that never happened again. Same thing with NBC in the early 2000s. So it goes without saying, the NFL is the most popular sport. It's the most popular form of entertainment that we have in the USA right now. But something interesting is happening today that's making me question whether that power is starting to get walked back. And it's because of the fight that Tegna is having with DirecTV. Tegna stations went dark on DirecTV at the end of November. 64 stations that have deals with ABC, Fox, CBS, NBC, others. We've been now through 2 weekends of NFL football. 2 weekends that included a Cowboys-Eagles game on Sunday night. It included the Chiefs-Bills game on Sunday afternoon that everybody was talking about the following day. And you know what? DirecTV is not budging from its position. Again, I've been covering this for decades. I've never seen this. Distributors always buckle in the face of losing NFL programming. Ultimately, this whole battle, it's all about price. But if you listen to DirecTV executives, it's the availability of these NFL games on direct-to-consumer services that has swung all the leverage from the networks back to the distributors. And seeing how these negotiations are playing out, it's hard to argue any differently.
I love when you say that you've been covering this for decades, like centuries. I covered it when the Egyptians put up the pyramids and how there's a cable dispute on that.
One of my first stories, Andrew, was with Cable Facts Daily when DirecTV got something called NFL Sunday Ticket and was like, oh my God, this sounds great. 1994.
I thought you were going to go off my pyramid thing. All right.
Oh, like ancient Egypt.
My who's down is MLB Network's John Morosi. For my brethren, Baseball Writer Association, it kills me to have to go after one of them, but Morosi had a tough day last Friday with the whole Ohtani situation. He reported that Shohei Ohtani was on a plane headed from Los Angeles to Toronto, which of course made speculation that Ohtani was going to be a Blue Jay. And then the internet went crazy. The problem, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth in during the topics, but the issue with Morosi's report is that if you have that information, now obviously it turned out to be wrong, so that's awful, but if you have that information, it's better to have it and then try to find out the context of what's going on than just to report that there's a plane flying from one place to another, even if you were correct about that, because without the context, we don't know what that means. He could have been, if it were true, he could have been going just for another meeting to see if he really likes Toronto. There's a lot of things that it could be. We found that especially with college football coaching searches, that people, look for private planes, which, again, that's the internet, being reporters. It's different than actual reporters. And Morosi's been an insider for a long time now to make that mistake. And now the whole world is like, baseball writers are wrong. Bob Nightingale from USA Today wrote a column just ripping his brethren. I didn't really understand. I mean, if that's how Bob, feels, fine. But, there's a lot of great reporters. And I would point out to people who are all over baseball writers, most of the baseball writers didn't report that. And there's a lot of pressure on you when someone's reporting something, especially about maybe the greatest free agent of all time. And there's a little nugget out there for people to hear from editors. And what do we know about this? And where is this? And you're trying to figure it out. And, the biggest rule you just can report what you know, even if somebody happens to seem like they know something else. In many cases, when there's only one person in this type of situation, that's kind of not the limb you want to be on. And in this case, it broke on Morosi.
Yeah, I have definite thoughts about that, Andrew. Let's make that a topic. It is a topic that we're going to discuss later on. I want to talk about your column that you had in New York Post Sports Plus newsletter that comes out reliably every Monday morning about the NBA and where you stand right now in terms of their negotiations. The deal's not going to come until well into the new year, but it is always helpful to see what we're hearing and sort of how these networks are jockeying for position.
All right, these are just projections that I did. So not, obviously I talked to a lot of people, but the biggest takeaway I did this first in March. So this is kind of like you have your mock drafts 2.0. This is my sports media projections 2.0. And the biggest takeaway is more than 3 partners is the feeling that I'm getting. If the NBA wants to reach the numbers that they have said, there were reports a couple of years ago about tripling what they're getting right now. I don't think they're going to do that. Maybe they double it, but to do that, do they need 4 partners? So look, I think there is a assumption. Let me just tell me if you agree with this, that ESPN and as well as Warner Brothers Discovery, they want back in, but they will take a little bit less of regular season games for ESPN. No Wednesday, possibly for Turner, TNT. No Thursday, move just to Tuesday. That seems like a possibility, and then still have the playoffs and then the finals for ABC. Do you agree with that? Then they would there would be an increase, but just maybe not as much as if you kept everything.
The worst part about your column that you wrote is that I didn't disagree with really anything that went in there. So,
Okay. All right. Well, good. So then you be quiet for the next 5 minutes. I'll just talk. No. Well, here's the one thing these are projections. Amazon on Thursdays, after NFL. And then as Jay Marine said, if you go back a couple podcasts ago, they want something significant in terms of playoffs or something similar to playoffs. Is that in season tournament? I don't know, but they want something significant in terms of spectacle events. That one, the favorites, not definite, but the favorites. I do think that there's a nice relationship between the NBA and Amazon.
let me open up here. Like, it's more than the favorites. Those three are heavy favorites, and to get some packages of NBA programming. What those packages will look like, we don't know yet. I find it right now in December 2023, it's almost unthinkable to think that ABC won't have the NBA Finals or ESPN won't have part of the NBA Finals or the conference championship games. How they divvy that up is what we're going to be really taking a look at. And that fourth package and who steps in for that fourth package, that's where the real jockeying is going to occur.
Yeah, like I'm not saying it's definite. Again, projections, not reporting, not fully like saying this is happening. Obviously, there's a difference. All right, there's a little bit of opinion here, but here's the thing about it. I do think that the NBA would like NBC involved. I think Adam Silver and the chairman of NBC Universal, Mark Lazarus, go back a long time to the Turner days. There's a lot of relationships there between the NBA and NBC. I think there's a nostalgic play, and I think they want broadcast. So how do they get on NBC? Well, there could be a Peacock component, of course.
Of course there will be, yeah.
But the NBA wants the broadcast. And if you're going to put stuff on broadcast, if you're NBC, you're saying we need a finals. So in that projection, I have the final alternating yearly from ABC to NBC. To me, that's a way to get the money up and to give something that's very substantial. And I could make an argument it might be better for the NBA to spread out the finals. It'd definitely be better for me and you, well, especially me, because I love writing about the broadcasters, because then there's more movement, because now there's only one finals right now team. And so as opposed to the NFL where you have the Super Bowl and there's many championship teams. That's my projection right now.
I've been, over the past several months, very lukewarm about NBC's involvement with this. I always consider Brian Roberts, the head of Comcast that owns NBC. His reputation is that he always bids just enough not to get, whatever property is out there. And I've been told reliably by insiders that NBC is very serious about the NBA. And your scenario there is one that does check out. Whether or not they pay enough for the finals, I'm not sure, but they do want a significant package.
But I don't think they're going to go crazy for it, right? We've been talking about this. You've been beating this drum for a while, right? That these media companies, the time that the NBA is coming up, it's not great. They're the NBA, so they should be okay, but they're going to have to be creative, and it's not the perfect timing in terms of what companies are doing overall. I don't think there's anybody out there who's just going to write some like crazy check. Fox in early 90s, or even if you look at the Amazon deal, which I think is a good one. I mean, obviously we don't see the back books, but the Amazon deal for Thursday nights to get in, they had to give the NFL $1 billion when, nobody else was probably going to come close to that. But you're not in position when you're trying to get in to something like the NFL. There's an entry fee. I mean, the NFL has that power, as you said in your who's down. They feel like they're responsible for everything except for world peace. And I mean, if they could work on that, Roger Goodell and company, I'd be appreciative. I think everyone would be. When you look at Apple and Netflix, though, I know you reported Netflix had some interest in the in-season tournament. Then they're harder to read because they're new into this stuff. But I'm not sure they're as aggressive right now.
Netflix had very early talks, and the talks were around the in-season tournament, and the talks were around developing a behind-the-scenes docuseries around the tournament and get everything going that way. I'm told those talks that they were at the highest levels. They've stalled a little bit. I would be surprised if Netflix came in on this round. The big question mark is Apple. Here's the whole deal with the NBA is that they're entering a marketplace where the established media companies, as you said, are not paying big money. They're constrained. They're constrained by big NFL deals that they have. They're constrained by cord cutting, which is cutting the distribution revenue that's coming in, and they're just constrained by financial upheaval that's going on. What do you call it? The home run hit, or the dream is that somebody's going to come with big pockets, maybe a $3 trillion company based up in Washington State or based in California that will pay for it. But what we have found out is that these digital companies, Apple, Amazon, even Google, YouTube, they've been more disciplined than I ever could have imagined in terms of these rights negotiations. So it would be really surprising if any one of them stepped up with that sort of bid that we were talking about.
Well, and here's the thing about it. They don't think of themselves as like some like newcomer, right? Who's not like this, like, oh, we're trying to get involved, right? Like Fox in the early 90s with Rupert Murdoch, they were trying to establish a network, and they were going to do it on the backs of the NFL. The Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, they're not trying to establish anything. They're already established. So they don't think like we should do a discount. They feel like they're just as viable, if not more viable, than the networks. And so, that's kind of a little bit of probably of a disconnect when you go forward with that.
Andrew, let's get to topic two. We want to talk about the NFL flex scheduling again. Once again, like moving forward, ESPN losing Patrick Mahomes playing against the Patriots for the Eagles and the Seahawks. Every single week, that's looking like a worse deal for ESPN, even if the Eagles-Seahawks game has a little bit more playoff implications.
Yeah, that's the first flex. We go back to it. We talked about it last week. Fox allowed that to happen by letting the Seattle versus Philadelphia game go to Monday Night Football. The way Fox looked at it, they got Kansas City and New England that they can move to 1 o'clock. It's 60% of the country. That Philadelphia-Seattle game was going to get lost a little bit because Dallas plays Buffalo, which is the game of the week at 4:25, America's game of the week. Like so many games of the week. What's Sunday Night Football, a football night in America?
This, Andrew, is the pod of the week. This is the pod.
CBS call it something? What does CBS call it? I just like just put it out there. They call it something.
The CBS game of the week.
That's it. Yeah, that's enough. I'm fine with that. We got to make it something. I get, NBC started that with the what they do with Sunday night, and then Fox I think went back at them with America's game of the week. I think we should ask Austin Karp to weigh on this later, but when you look at it, would you rather have Chiefs off of the Mahomes bad loss in New England with a big win over the Steelers, or would you rather have this Philadelphia team going up to Seattle? Seattle's on a 3-game losing streak now, suddenly 6-7.
If I'm a TV executive, I want Patrick Mahomes playing in a game that matters. But I also want to go real back quickly back at Fox. Fox gave its blessing. That was a protected game that Fox had. But these are all moves that are dictated by the league. The league is who decides what gets flexed into the primetime games and not. ESPN can send out a wish list and say, we hope to get this game. But ultimately, it has to come from the league level.
I have exclusive audio that I've obtained of NFL league negotiations with their partners every week. If you could be the partner, I just need you to say, okay, we want to do this.
Oh, absolutely. No problem.
All right. That's our exclusive audio that we've obtained from the NFL when they talk to the networks, and how, even though the networks pay them billions of dollars, that's how they go.
No problemo.
All right, let's go, Andrew, to topic 3. It's a story that you broke this week about Al Michaels is not doing a playoff game for NBC. He appeared to be expecting to do a playoff game for NBC. And the question that I have, I've been a big defender of Al Michaels. I think he still has the voice. I always defer back to like the big game voices, and he still has that for me. Why did NBC make this decision?
Well, 2 things. Number one, that should be understood is like NBC, like he knew this. Like I didn't just tell him this, right? In November, I called him. I wrote a column where I talked with Al, and I said that I felt like the best course of action for him to get in front of everything would be to maybe to announce that he's going to do this year and then the rest of next year. So nice retirement tour for the guy who is probably the best TV NFL play-by-player of all time. He didn't necessarily want to do that. When I talked to him, I'd already heard that he might not be doing the NBC playoff game. You'll remember last year, I got widely panned. He and Tony Dungy doing the Jaguars, great comeback for lack of enthusiasm. Al's, comeback to that was like, people on social media didn't know. Look, I agree. Social media is terrible and people are pretty much stupid for largely. There's some smart people out there, but there's a lot of ganging up and just utter stupidity out there. That said, I don't think it was without merit. I think there are times that we see him on Amazon. It hasn't been as good. I think what's lost in all this is that at the end with NBC, there weren't good relations. I mean, they had promised Tirico the job. Tirico had patiently waited for the job, and Al kept trying to keep the job for a long time. And so they gave him the Emirates title, but they never really were able to explain what that meant. Right? They did that with Bob Costas and Tom Brokaw, who were kind of more, I think, associated with NBC. They kind of would be able to explain how they were going to be used. With Al, it was like, all right, well, they're still paying him apparently, but what is he going to do? He did the one playoff game. This year, he's not doing the playoff game. So when I talked to him in November, I brought it up. I told him, I heard it was in limbo. But the reason I hadn't reported it till now is because with Al, he's a fighter and he's strong and he will pull as many levers as he can to try to change things up. So I didn't want to write something that wasn't definitive until it was. And Greg Hughes, their VP at NBC Sports, he confirmed it to me the other day. And so I went forward with it, called out, did not hear back. But yeah, that's the reasoning behind it.
Hughes with the pod shout out. That's impressive. If you're NBC though, like, why did you make that decision?
Well, two things. I think there's like a feeling that, that I've heard is, some people are kind of like what you're saying. It's like Al should just decide when he wants to go. But the thing is, if you keep staying and you don't leave, then eventually they do kind of tell you it's time to go. So it's like one of those catch-22s. You'll notice like during the Super Bowl, right? That was probably his final Super Bowl. He's done 11 along with Pat Summerall most ever. There was not a lot of hubbub about that from NBC or Al. There was like 45 seconds where they sort of acknowledged it, which kind of shows you that the tensions were not great, that this wasn't like a mutual decision. Let's all go out together. And this isn't unusual. Like Al's always said, like basically all the legends say, like, I'll be the first one to know when it's time to go. Al still can do it. Like he can still do it. Like I'm not as big a fan as some others of like him, like ripping on the games. And he hasn't done it as much this year because I just think we're all choosing to watch the games. And so I don't think that's necessarily the job. Sometimes you could say a little something, but I think it gets a little overboard or did last year. And it shouldn't be like, they're paying them, a lot of money, like maybe not $1 million a game, but huge money. And so the idea that like there's a thing that is this game good enough? This Amazon Thursday night for Al Michaels. He is Al Michaels, but that should not be a thing. Not for that kind of payday. It should be enhanced. He should be enhancing it and building it up. And I get it. He says, I'm not trying to sell 20-year-old Mazdas, but the games aren't beneath you. Like, it's not like every week, every broadcaster gets to look at the game schedule and be like, is that good enough for me? And even if you're Al Michaels, I don't think that should be the case. And so I don't know. I don't know if NBC necessarily owed Al Michaels anything at this point. Because, they're allowed to make a decision of who they want to do the game. And last year it wasn't, again, I think Al's, probably the best of all time doing it. Last year, that game wasn't up to Al Michaels standards, in my opinion. He might not, he hasn't agreed. He's been on many a podcast and many an interview and said, he did it fine. He does it this way. But the job also, when you have a partner, is not to just be like, well, this is how I do the games, and the partner has to adjust. So if you're with Tony Dungy, who's low energy, then you have to be higher energy as the play-by-play. You're the guy who needs to make it work, not the analyst, generally speaking. So, and even with Herbstreit, I think like they're two both. Like Herbstreit's not a high energy analyst. He would be better off with maybe a little bit more high energy from a play-by-player. And so I think that yin and yang sometimes gets lost. So I think that's when you add it all up, that's where it comes out.
Andrew, I want to go to the next topic. Your who's down, John Morosi, and I have sort of two comments I wanted to make on it. One is I feel bad for him. He did come out and he corrected himself, maybe a little bit too late, but he made a mistake. He corrected it. Let's move on to a certain extent. But then the other side of the coin is like we've been around social media for long enough that I would have expected him to know better. I recall in the early days of Twitter, I was talking to somebody who told me that I forget what player, but an NBA player was going to be suspended the NBA had already told him that he was going to be suspended in a playoff series. I was like, what? Why hasn't that been reported yet? And they go, well, he's in the plane. They're going to wait for the plane to land, and then they're going to announce it. So I went on Twitter and I put it out there. I didn't do what I would have done had I been publishing that in Sports Business Journal. And when that started getting picked up, and it got picked up as Sports Business Journal is reporting, and I was like, oh boy, I did not report this. Thank God that ended up playing out and being true. But there was a period of about like an hour and a half where I was like, I didn't report. I didn't do nearly what I should have done to put that out. That wasn't nearly good enough to go into our publication. But I felt like, Twitter at the time, I was talking to my friends, and so it's a difference. So that when you go out with something like that on Twitter, you have to report that out. Like we should know about this in 2023.
Look, none of us are perfect, right? When you cover the media,
you're perfect, Andrew.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Very nice of you to say. But none of us are perfect, so we all can make mistakes. The one thing I would say, and Joel Sherman, our outstanding baseball columnist at the Post, who's also on MLB Network, and has a podcast with John Heyman for the Post. He told me this like when I was a young reporter. He's just a little bit older than me, but he said to me, all you have is your reputation, and you can only report what you know. And that's always stuck with me because, and especially when these stories like this, like when you want really badly, the more badly you want it or the faster everything is going, the more times you need to say, like, I need to take a deep breath and make sure I got this right. Because the second you start rushing is when you mess up. Because what's going on in the social media age is like reporting's supposed to take 2 seconds. And sometimes it does. Sometimes you can do things very fast. But a lot of times you don't, especially if you want multiple sources, which you should, unless you have like a primary source, right? You want multiple sources, or you want to be able to check with places that it's correct. The big thing is, and I said it at the, who's down thing, is that he didn't have the context of it. And so when you start going so fast, or you want a story to be true and you don't fully have it, especially something that's going to get so much attention like the Ohtani story, you hurt your reputation. And, John Morosi hurt his reputation. I mean, this is going to stick with him for his career. He's been on the air, likable, nice, good guy. But it was a mistake because also what was he reporting? Like he would have been, see, this is the thing about it. This is very inside, but I think it's worth it, is that he would have been better off waiting and trying to figure out what it meant. If he had said something like, and I'm not a huge fan of like saying who's the favorite, who's in the lead, especially about signings in baseball, because what does it mean unless you actually put your, you actually agree, right? If you say somebody's the favorite to sign somebody. That said, if he had said something like Blue Jays appear to have momentum towards Ohtani, again, wouldn't have been great, might have been bad, but it wasn't as, there's something he could have done, or at least try to find out more. And he didn't do that. And so that's where he put himself at risk. And he ended up apologizing, which again, I used to give people a lot of credit when they apologize, which I do give them credit. But then like, I feel like there's been like a over index on like, oh, we apologized on everything. Or like an announcer says something wrong and they're like, oh, I made a mistake. And now we're like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. And it's like, okay, I mean, yes, I used to say that, but now I feel like it's over emphasize that like we're giving too much credit for saying you made a mistake. I saw people like kind of claim, and even Nightingale's column, I think Don Van Natta from ESPN was ripping on baseball writers as if like they're all just like beholden to agents and executives. Like, no, that's not how reporting works. And it's disappointing to think that that's how like sometimes people who I respect, both of those guys, that they think that's how like reporting from baseball writers work. Yes. Do baseball writers have relationships with agents? Are there some that do appear maybe not as, good as others? Yeah, that might be true. But the way you break stories is you hear things, and that's from talking from a large array of people. And then you have the ability to go to the right people and say, is this true? And that's how you break stories. And that's true for whatever you cover. So the idea that baseball writers are just sitting around waiting for like crumbs from every executive is
for the phone to ring.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, we're not just like, I just, like, again, there's people in the business who you hear this from who just like kind of assume how reporting's done. And that's disappointing. But I just think like that's not, again, I'm not saying like there are people who do their job poorly and that's how they do it, but not overall. I don't think that's how it's done.
Well, it was just a tweet. It was only a tweet, but I do know like at least one of the wire services sent a bunch of reporters to the Toronto airport. Like it was a tweet that created like it was more than just people getting bad information. It actually created this frenzy in Toronto about trying to be there when the plane landed.
100%. All right, we'll have Karp's Corner in a minute. I want to talk about the Ohtani deal and its relation to the media. Your newsletter that comes out on Mondays in the Sports Business Journal. You had a very, very interesting and enlightening story about the Dodgers' agreement with Charter and how it works, and how it impacts the Ohtani deal. And I think it's very important. So not as entertaining, I have to say, as Chris Russo at the top. It's just calling things a joke, but that makes Russo, and this makes Ourand. So what can you tell us?
I'm going to try to channel my inner Russo. Can you believe what happened, Andrew? I've been writing about and we've been talking about the problems in the RSN market for how long now, and the whole knock-on effect of media money is at best going to be even. Most likely, it's going to be taking a step back, and that's going to affect player salaries. That's going to affect, potentially like valuations of some of the teams that are in the leagues until they figure out how to recreate all the money that came from the cable bundle. And then all of a sudden, we end up with that Ohtani deal. And it's like that flies completely in the face of what we've been talking about. Like, how on earth can they afford for the next 10 years to pay $70 million a year for Ohtani? Sports Time Ohio, the Dodgers own the network, but they're in business with Charter, and the deal terms that were negotiated by Guggenheim, I want to get Guggenheim to negotiate for me, mandates that Charter has to pay $334 million per year. That's the average going into I think 2038, the late 2030s. They have to pay that regardless of whether they have, millions of subscribers or if the number of subscribers falls down to 2. Like, they're on the hook for that. So everything that's happening with cord cutting and the loss of revenues that all the networks are facing, that's hitting Sportsnet Ohio. They're getting less revenue in, but it's not going to hit the team at all. And I've been told by people in that market that the money coming into the Dodgers, if the subscriber number does go down to 2, like, they don't care. They're going to keep reaping that money in. So the Dodgers are inoculated from it. And the other aspect of it, I'm already worried about Adley Rutschman's next contract negotiations, or Gunnar Henderson's, because in Baltimore, there has been a divide between the haves and the have-nots. I mean, the $334 million for the Dodgers, of course, are going to have more money to spend. You look at the Yankees and the money they get off the Yes Network, and that helps. The Red Sox and NESN. You've already had the haves, the big market haves, and the small market have-nots. Well, now, in that story that you referenced, I drew a comparison to San Diego, which was a free spending San Diego. Well, they lost their media deal with Bally Sports. Bally Sports, the local RSN, declared bankruptcy. In San Diego, the Padres were getting $65 million a year, a lot less than 334, but $65 million. It went down by about 10% when MLB took over. Like, it's going to be close to zero now, until they end up doing a new deal with whoever steps in there. So the difference between the haves and the have-nots is only growing in baseball, and that's potentially a really big problem.
All right, 2 things. Number one, the other really good point that I thought you had in your newsletter was that people might be thinking, well, they'll just file for bankruptcy like Sinclair and Diamond Sports, and they're getting out of all these deals. No, as you mentioned, Charter is whatever you said. How many billion-dollar company?
Charter, market cap of $55 billion with a B.
Yeah, so they're not going into bankruptcy. So that's number one. Number two, I Let's bring in Chris Russo. Chris, who had better points, you or John Ourand?
Our good buddy there, John Ourand.
All right. He says
Thank you, Chris.
Ourand.
Thank you, Chris. My good friend, Chris Russo.
John Ourand. John, now it's one of our favorite segments of the pod. Karps Corner.
Karps Corner.
Good to be back, fellas.
Yeah, Austin Karp, Sports Business Journal, ratings guru. Austin, let's start in-season tournament for the NBA. What's your impression of the in-season tournament?
Well, I'm impressed with the first season. Let's start with the numbers around the championship game. You had Lakers, Pacers. That was ABC and ESPN2. You had a Kevin Hart-led alternate telecast, which contributed around 9-10% of the audience. 4.6 million viewers for that game. So what does that mean? Okay, that is essentially what ESPN got for the clinching Grizzlies-Lakers first-round playoff game last year. I was on ESPN, obviously an ABC game. It's a tough comp, but I think that's really impressive. It's a playoff-type number. It is probably middle of the road if you're considering like a Christmas Day audience, especially for ABC. The ABC Christmas Day games generally draw a higher number, but for this, the first time, I think it's a really impressive number given what they wanted to achieve, which was people tuning in at a much higher level than a normal regular season game. Looking at the NBA in-season tournament overall, I think it was a decent package. I think it was an incredibly good start the first year, especially for the numbers ESPN on Friday. Those games outdrew what ESPN was getting in those same November windows last year. Same for TNT for their Tuesday night games. It just drove up a little more interest, especially when you're going up against football, college, pro, and football is still top of people's mind. I think it was good for the NBA to just raise awareness of their game at the start of the season, and the NBA in-season tournament, the numbers show that they did that.
What about these numbers surprised you?
I think that none of them were able to really achieve what opening night was able to get. It wasn't that strong of a level. It was not until the championship game that they draw like a really strong number, like, okay, this really had some pop to it. But that championship game, I wouldn't say it surprised me, but it was a good number.
Yeah, Lakers obviously helps. All right, let's move to the NFL. We're coming to the stretch drive of the regular season. Your biggest impression thus far of this NFL season, TV ratings-wise?
I think it's really strong what CBS has been able to do, especially with the new rules, which everyone traditionally thought of CBS, especially that 425 window. You're only going to get AFC teams. With the way that NFL scheduling has gone in the last few years, you're getting the best matchup that they can possibly provide in that window. And sometimes it's going to be NFC teams. And what you're seeing is CBS is actually having a little bit of an edge for their national window versus even what Fox has been able to get. Now, Fox has been winning that 4:25 p.m. Eastern Sunday window for years now. And you always heard at the end of the season, Fox, oh, we had the best window. And they'll be arguing with NBC, which says we had the best package. But CBS is now coming and say, hey, we have the better number for that 4:25 window. And that's one of the effects you're seeing from the league top down. Give better games, put the best games in the best windows.
Well, also the main reason that the NFC outrates the AFC has nothing to do with the teams, but it's the markets the NFC's in. And so that's why Fox is always in the driving position here. And now that you have cross-flex and you don't have really a traditional NFC versus AFC, game, that has to be a reason why CBS is doing as well as it is this season.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get some of those NFC markets in there, that's huge. Like you said, a lot of the population, most of the football viewing population is going to live east of the Mississippi and along the coast there. But I would say a lot of this stuff in recent years, in the last 10, 15 years, was also very quarterback driven. And you used to have a lot of that on the AFC side. I remember us making a huge deal back in 2007 when you had undefeated Tom Brady going up against undefeated Peyton Manning and the Colts. Like a lot of that good quarterback play had gotten away from the AFC in the last couple of years. You thought coming into this year you would have a lot of good matchups, whether it was Justin Herbert and Burrow and Rodgers with the Jets, and with so many injuries. Like, I think CBS is really happy to have that cross flex and get some NFC teams in there.
Wait a second. You mentioned Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Justin Herbert.
Austin? Same conversation. I got quarterbacks all day for you, John.
I got last one off the board a little bit. If you're Monday Night Football, would you rather have Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City versus New England, or Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts versus Seattle this upcoming Monday?
Right now, I'd rather have the Chiefs. I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles have really done themselves a ratings disservice, never mind the disservice for their record with their performance over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, all that matters is the ratings.
I'd go Chiefs. I want Chiefs there.
Final one for
me. I only
me,
want the number. I only want the best viewership.
Exactly. That's all you care. We used to be in the press box like, oh, you're rooting for the Yankees, you're rooting for this team, you're rooting for the Orioles, whatever. They always say it to beat writers. You're only rooting for a good game. Austin Karp only roots for the TV ratings. He's sitting there and
I like the Yankees and the Red Sox. They're both just really good teams, and I hope everyone does well.
We're rooting for the storyline. Austin's rooting for the numbers.
Austin, last one for me. Amazon numbers, they're up double digits every single game. Why is that? What do you make of that?
I think the lineup of games is a little better this year. I think that the discoverability factor is improving in year 2. That's any network's problem or issue is they had year one. All right, people are starting to figure out this is where you're going to go. And newer networks, whenever there's a switch, we always would talk about it years past when something moved from broadcast to cable, and cable is really getting marquee events like the college football playoff and more NBA playoff games. And now we're seeing it with football. It's not hard to get to Amazon Prime. So the rise doesn't surprise me as much. People know where Amazon is, and they know how to get on. If you've been to Amazon for any of these games, you know it's very easy, right top there to click on the game. So it's not hard, and it's not surprising to me that you're seeing an uptick there for Thursday Night Football.
So a prediction for 2024, another potential double-digit jump for Amazon. It sounds like as that the discoverability continues.
If I had to guess, I'd put it more in the 7 to 9% next year.
That's what they do long term. John wants to have the Super Bowl the first year and to have ratings that are like 100 million.
$3 trillion company, $3 trillion.
It doesn't work, but they look at it long term. You should read a book about Amazon. They look at it long term. Anyway, Austin Karp, Karp's Corner.
Karp's Corner.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Man. Yeah, Austin, very good. Karp's Corner. John, another successful podcast. Appreciate everyone listening. AC Wyatt, producer, puts it all together. Master of the board, Chris Mason, with all the drops, and always stay around for bloopers after. Those are always fun and enjoyable. If you could like it, review it, we appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
I see Chris. I see AC. I don't see Hollywood Ourand. Where is he? We're all here on time. Hollywood's nowhere to be found.
Or 3 minutes early, too. So
3 minutes early, but Coughlin time. When we had Eli Manning on, when did he show up? He was like 10 minutes early. I shouldn't say who you're usually waiting for, so I shouldn't say, but all I know is today I'm here, Hollywood Ourand, nowhere to be found. Sorry, someone threw me off with a DM or text that came across. And so when you go from there, you don't have I might lost my thought.
It must have been a good text. I can't get over Austin's new hairstyle. You look like an Eastern European NBA basketball player right now.
Austin, can you hear us?
I don't think he can hear us.